in tax-free cash. Text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Migration Advisory Committee tell the government that if the number of foreign students gets cut, some of our universities could collapse. But hey, would that really matter? A big summit at Downing Street today on farming, where Rishi Sunak tells farmers, we are on your side. But has that always been true of this government? And have we now found a wonder drug that doesn't just deal with obesity, but actually could reduce heart disease as well? We'll discuss all of that and how much we trust Big Pharma and much, much more after the news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Nigel, thank you very much. The top stories this evening. A major manhunt is underway in France after 2 prison guards were shot dead and 3 others seriously injured during an ambush on a prison convoy. Vehicles were rammed at toll booths on a motorway at Anqueville in the northwest of the country. Images on social media showed at least 2 men in balaclavas carrying rifles near an SUV that was in flames. The car appeared to have been rammed into the front of the prison van. Local media is naming the suspect as Mohamed Amra, who's 30, and reportedly has ties to powerful gangs in the city of Marseille. In Georgia, huge numbers of riot police have broken up crowds of protesters who believe their nation is on a path to dictatorship. Demonstrators broke through the barriers outside the Parliament building, where a controversial law has been passed. The Foreign Agents Bill puts limits on media and non-governmental organisations which receive at least a fifth of their funding from abroad. These are the scenes live from Tbilisi, where crowds are still gathered outside after clashes with officers. Critics are calling it the Russian law and think it'll damage aspirations to join the EU. However, Georgia's government insists it's needed to promote transparency. A Home Office minister says the Good Friday Agreement should not be read so creatively as to cover migration issues. It's after a judge at Belfast High Court ruled that parts of the government's Illegal Migration Act should not be applied in Northern Ireland. Responding to an urgent question from the DUP, Tom Pursglove said the government intends to appeal against the court's judgment and would not be deterred from its Rwanda plan. And the Prime Minister is calling on shoppers to back British produce as he hosts the second Farm to Fork summit at Downing Street. Labour says the Conservatives have driven farmers to breaking point and have pledged a new deal they say will put money back into their pockets. But Rishi Sunak's told members of the food industries that Britain must reduce its reliance on fruit and vegetables from overseas.
We are going to stick to our plan, supporting you to keep creating great jobs across the United Kingdom and keep making the food that we know and love so dearly. And specifically to our British farmers, I do want to say this: we are with you.
For all of the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Nigel.
Good evening. Now, this is my last pitch to you because the Trick Awards this year, and I'm on the long list to be News Presenter of the Year, voting closes at 5 o'clock on Friday. So you can go to poll-tric.org.uk or throughout this programme, on the bottom right-hand side of the screen, there'll be the QR code. You can use your phone if you want to vote for me. But remember, last year, you did vote for me in big numbers, and me winning really upset the established television industry. It was simply the most enormous fun. Now, should we slash foreign graduate numbers is our debate today. And this follows a report from the Migration Advisory Committee. And they're saying to the government, and they've conducted a long review into this, that they find no evidence of widespread abuse. OK, I'll come to that in a moment. But they do say if there was a big reduction of numbers, some of our universities might just collapse. Let me just run through with you some of the numbers. They are staggering. In 2023, there were 460,000 sponsored study visas. 460,000 students came to us in that year. What is even more staggering is that we allowed 144,000 dependents to come. Students come with dependents. Yes, I know it seems absolutely batty, but that's what we allow to do. And that is something like the number of student visas, 70% higher than in 2019. 70% higher under this government. They argue that it's a good thing. They argue that it's good for the economy. Where are they coming from? China, India, Nigeria, chiefly. But here's the bit that really, really is annoying, I think. The proportion of students granted leave to remain, which means they can then stay for the rest of their lives if they want to, tripled between 2019 and 2023 from 18% to 56%. You begin to understand why with this and other areas, legal, forget the boats for a minute, legal net migration in this country has simply exploded. Now, they have changed the rules. They have said that for this year, no foreign students are allowed to bring dependents with them. And they think because of that, we will get a much, much smaller net migration figure. But even if we do, why the hell were they allowing this in the first place? It seems to me that many of our, not all, but many of our universities have become absolutely drunk on foreign money, be it grants from China or foreign students. And I wonder whether this is all to the benefit of British students going on to further education. So I think we should slash the numbers. Also, we should be careful about who we allow in. And just coming as a student should not give you automatic leave to remain. That's my political position on all of it. So let me know what you think. Should we slash student numbers, foreign student numbers? Farage@gbnews.com. I'm joined by Alex Proudfoot, Chief Executive of the independent higher education sector. Alex, the numbers of foreign students coming to Britain has just exploded over the last few years. I guess for many of the universities, they see this as a big business opportunity.
Well, as far as we see it, education is a great British export. I mean, it's one of the few things we do really fantastically these days, and it's a growth market around the world. We're brilliant at, finance, professional services, the creative industries. But education is actually probably our best export, because not only does it bring revenue into the exchequer and into institutions and communities, it also boosts our soft power in ways that we can only kind of imagine. The HEPI, the Higher Education Policy Institute, published a regular soft power ranking which looks at how many world leaders were educated in the UK, and not just leaders of governments, but also business leaders. They go back and they have a favourable view of the UK, and it's one of the secret sources of our trade.
You've made the argument for it, and you're right. We do have universities that rank very highly on the global scale. Of that, there is no doubt. But I mean, my point is that if coming as a student allows you to bring dependents, and then ultimately, if 60% now of those that come use it as a route, I mean, it's become a route to immigration, and that's the bit that I find objectionable given the sheer numbers. But that's not your concern. The government have decided at last to stop student dependents coming.
Yeah.
But if we get a reduction, a significant reduction in the number of foreign graduates that come. And if that puts financial pressures on some of our universities, be they the ones we're used to or the independent ones that you are looking after, and those universities have to contract, is that a bad thing?
I would argue it's a very bad thing for the communities in which they're based. I think it's a bad thing for the economy nationally. I think it's a particularly bad thing with our members when it comes to particular industries. Our members generally work hand in glove with employers, whether that's in the creative industries like film, music design and fashion, whether it's in engineering, whether that's in business and law. The employers really value the graduates they're producing and the skills that they bring to the workplace. So I think, fortunately, we are where we are in terms of the world, development of the world and the modern economy of the world. We need more highly trained, highly skilled, highly educated individuals. That won't just be from university.
Yes, but hang on a sec. No, I don't disagree with that point. But don't we need more highly trained, highly skilled technicians, doctors, engineers who are actually British?
Well, absolutely, and we should be encouraging as many of them as possible to take those courses, and we should be funding them.
So why don't we? I mean, here's an idea for the election. Why don't we say the STEM subjects? Science, technology, engineering, medicine, mathematics, which are needed, no question. We could say there are no tuition fees on those, couldn't we?
How wonderful! Who's paying for it?
Well, all of this comes at a cost, but that would only be a fraction of the number of students going to university. I mean, the broader point, OK, we've discussed foreign students. You made the argument for, I worry that the numbers are too big and I worry that it's a route to long-term immigration. That's a
Can I allay your worry slightly on that
Go
point?
on.
You mentioned earlier a few minutes ago, that leave to remain, that many take leave to remain. Leave to remain is not permanent residency. That just means you're extending your visa.
Yeah, but it's the first step towards it. And once you've done that for a couple of years, it's almost automatic.
Definitely not.
Almost automatic.
If you're here on a study visa or on a graduate visa, that doesn't count at all to permanent residency. It's an entirely separate track from the work route or from the family route if you come here as someone's partner. With those routes, you can spend 5 years and you can get 5
But
residency.
you've got the time then to get yourself a job and then you can stay. That's politics. I don't want to discuss...
If you're good enough, you can get a job,
I have to say, I think the Migration Advisory Committee are wrong. I think this is open to abuse. But I want to come back to British students, if I can, because I've got you here and it's valuable. I've been arguing for some time that we're sending far too many young people to university. We've conned hundreds of thousands of young people since Tony Blair set the 50% target. The Conservatives, of course, have agreed with it, and we're pretty much there already. And my fear is, Alex, that a lot of young people are coming out of university with quite big debt around their necks, with degrees that do not further them in the workplace whatsoever, who have probably been indoctrinated with some left-wing ideology. And I just wonder whether setting arbitrary targets like 50% actually makes any sense.
Far be it from me to defend Tony Blair, but that target is actually much misunderstood. The target was 50% of people going to level 5, I think it's 4 or 5, or 75 and above. It actually includes technician programmes as part of that target.
Because we got rid of
That's fallen behind a bit,
Because we got rid of techs and called them universities, basically.
We're kind of reversing the trend a little bit now. There are things called institutes of technology. Our members also, they aren't the kind of government-sponsored institutes of technology, but they have the same kind of mix of programmes. So whether that's the Academy of Live Technology in Wakefield or Dyson Institute of Engineering Technology, these are places who really put sort of skills first, and oftentimes they won't necessarily require a full bachelor's degree. I think what we're kind of quite keen as an organisation to do is encourage a sort of right-sizing of people. People just get the learning they need to get the career they want. So not necessarily everything is a 3-year degree, although places like Buckingham offer 2-year degrees, which is a really good idea.
That's right. I remember when Buckingham started, and why would people pay to go, and then tuition fees came in, and of course if you're at Buckingham paying 2 years tuition fees, it's no more expensive, is it, than going through the normal route?
It isn't, and you save on accommodation costs, maintenance costs, and you get into the workforce quicker. It's really popular amongst our members, particularly for older students who know what they want to do, or they might be changing career, and they have a sort of real target in mind in terms of employability, and they go for it for 2 years.
And the independent sector is growing?
It is growing. I mean, it's very hard to keep track of it, really. We have 80 members now, but just the number of providers who offer some kind of degree-level provision is over 400 independent providers. And if you go further with technical courses, with vocational courses, you're looking at over 1,000. It's it's very diverse. I think diversity is one of its strengths.
Well, I tell you what, I think the more people that do technical courses and get genuine trades and skills, whether we call it university or not, is a very good thing for our country. And I take your point that we've kind of recategorised a lot of things as being university, and maybe that's how we got to 50%. I still think too many are going to doing social studies, but that is by the by.
I mean, this is kind of a thought experiment you'd have. If you're a kind of local authority, local government representative or elected representative in let's say, Middlesbrough or Huddersfield, you know, or an area which hasn't got a university at the moment, say, if you offer them a university, they'll bite your hand off because they know how much investment it attracts in, how many skilled jobs it creates, how much it can drive innovation in the local sort of employers as well, in local industry. I think, you know, there's not every area needs a large university. Sometimes they could be smaller and specialists, but some form of post-18 education, I think, is a way to go in most parts of the country.
Alex Proudfoot, you've made a very positive case there, and if that was the case for everybody, if foreign students were coming here and paying their money and not using it as a backdoor route to long-term stay, and if many more of those that went to university aged 18 or 19 came out with trades and skills, I would be happier than I am. In a moment, a farming summit in the garden of number 10 Downing Street, where Rishi Sunak looks farmers in the eye and says, "We are on your side." Is it just electioneering? And do they have much of a record to be proud of when it comes to UK food production?
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Today marks the 13th anniversary of the wedding of the Prince and Princess of Wales, and they've released an unseen photograph of their wedding day. It's an absolutely wonderful picture, and joining me now to discuss this is the former BBC Royal correspondent, Michael Cole. Michael, always a delight. What a great way to start the week to have you on the show on a Monday. Britain's favourite royal couple, a sensational picture reminding us of why they're so wonderful and popular.
Good afternoon, Martin. Yes, and I think we can, on behalf of the whole country, send our congratulations. 13 years, 3 beautiful children being brought up properly, and very, very good going. And I have to tell you this, Martin, very close to home for you, a 13th wedding anniversary is a lace wedding anniversary. And there she is, dressing in lace. Nottingham and lace were once synonymous. And what a beautiful picture this is. Not a picture contemporary from the wedding day when the prince had changed from his red tunic, which he wore for his wedding at Westminster Abbey, into a guards officer's day dress, a uniform with the frogging, very, very handsome. I know that the Queen insisted that he wore the red tunic of the guards. I'm not sure whether he was very happy about that because he did most of his service in the RAF. And I personally feel that the RAF blue uniform with the white bride's dress would have been better. I always think when I see red and white like that, I always think of a barber's pole. Of course, because she's undergoing treatment and we wish her so much better as soon as possible. There's not a new photograph.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is the nightmare for the Conservatives. Again, down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I asked you, should we slash foreign graduate numbers? Loads of responses coming in. Steve says, too many second-rate universities offering third-rate irrelevant degrees, reduce foreign students, cull the number of universities and concentrate on quality. I think I'm with you there, Steve. Jackie says, we should not only stop foreign students, we should close down all universities as students are being indoctrinated and brainwashed. Yeah, I know, Jackie, many of them are madrasas of Marxism. I do understand that. I think maybe closing them all down is a little bit radical. And Alan says, provided they pay up front for everything and leave at the end of the course on foreign students. And yeah, the fact that it's being used as a backdoor to long-term immigration, and they've been allowed up until this point to bring dependents with them. I think the whole thing has been completely outrageous. Now, Downing Street this morning, a gathering, apparently, of all the great and good from British farming, and Rishi Sunak, they're giving a speech talking about food production. But let's just remind ourselves of what this government since 2019 has done to British farming. Here was Boris Johnson at the Conservative Party conference just over 3 years ago.
We are going to rewild parts of the country and consecrate a total of 30% to nature. We're planting tens of millions of trees. Otters are returning to rivers from which they have been absent for decades. Beavers that have not been seen on some rivers since Tudor times, massacred for their pelts and now back. And if that isn't conservatism, my friends, I don't know what is. Build back beaver, I say.
It's just absolutely cringe-making, isn't it, to watch it? So Boris wanted to take 30% of UK farmland out of food production. Let's be clear, that's what his plan was. And also, of course, the mad rush to net zero has meant that much of our good farmland and some of our less good farmland has been turned over, of course, to solar farms. I can't think of any government in modern times that has done more to stop British food production. But, hey, today, apparently, that's all changed. Here was Rishi Sunak in the garden of Number 10. And watch this clip and think to yourself, if you're giving a speech and right next to you a military band is playing the national anthem, would you have carried on with the speech or would you have stopped and stood to attention? Watch this.
That's why today it's the second Farm to Fork Summit. We said we would start this, and oh, there we go, fantastic. And I'm very keen to make sure that we do keep producing more of the nation's food because this issue matters to me personally. Today, we're doing something that many of you have asked us to do rightly for years, and that's to publish our first ever draft UK-wide food security index, which I think is a landmark moment in this conversation. We've committed to publishing it annually. It will allow us to monitor and keep an eye on in-year shocks and make sure that we can maintain our commitments on food production as set out in our food strategy and ensure that we back you all the way. So the band are doing it better than me. Let me just close with saying an enormous thank you and enjoy the morning.
Well, 2 points there. The first is, I'm told many in the crowd did stand to attention because, you know, the band were playing the national anthem. Sunak chose not to. Although it was an odd choice. But what about the content of what he had to say? We're on your side. We're with you. And we're going to appoint a new commissioner for tenant farming. Yes, what we're going to do is bureaucratise farming even more. And that's really, really going to help you. And we're going to launch a new food security index to measure how much of the fruit and veg that we consume is produced in this country. Well, it is just pure electioneering. And as I say, it runs completely contrary to everything that we tried to do in Boris Johnson's time. But I guess that's politics. Well, I said all the great and the good of British farming were invited. One person who wasn't invited is Liz Webster from Save British Farming. And Liz has been in the studio before with us. Liz, of course, very much behind the recent farming protests. So they didn't want you there?
No, we didn't get an invitation.
Why?
I don't know.
And
you would have thought we'd be invited, but also Farmers Weekly weren't invited. You know, that is the one magazine that really, really is about farming. You know, even Jeremy Clarkson talks about Farmers Weekly, but Rishi left them out. So that really shows he wasn't serious about farming.
Yeah, and you saw the point I made about government policy was rewilding, the encouragement of solar farms, and now suddenly they want us to produce more of our own food. And I know that we're in post-Brexit Britain, and you and I disagreed on that, but we are where we are. And I understand that after 47 years of accepting policy from elsewhere, we have to start thinking for ourselves. And I get that that's not always going to be an immediate or smooth transition. But I mean, what is the real? I mean, this is just pure electioneering today. What is the real message to farming from government?
Well, it is pure electioneering, and it's trying to make out that if they're re-elected, I guess, that they will start to listen. But quite frankly, it's very, very late in the day. Anything he said today, we know we're facing a Labour government, even if we don't have enough farmers anyway. If they do decide to vote for the Conservatives, which I don't think a lot of them will, they're not going to get these promises delivered. And it's also worth remembering that Rishi Sunak was Chancellor before he was Prime Minister. He had his hands on the till, and we started protesting in that year, 2020, as the Agriculture Act was going through Parliament, and we said, where's the food plan? There was never a food plan.
But now there is.
It was an environmental act. It's not an agriculture act.
Now he's launching a food security index.
Look, they tore up, and it was a major tear-up between our trade, especially for agriculture, with the European Union. And then they changed all of the laws to look after agriculture and turned around and said, don't worry, farmers, put your cap on and go out and cut the hedges and plant some flowers. And if you're lucky, put a solar park in if the grid can cope with it to get a bit of income. And largely that's what they've done to us. And, yeah, I probably wasn't invited because if I had the opportunity to ask Rishi something, this is exactly what I'd be saying, because we're now in a really dangerous situation on food. We have, since Brexit happened, we've become more reliant on food from Europe than ever before.
Which is bonkers, because actually one of the points of Brexit was it would be easier to import food from and cheaper from other parts of the world.
Well,
but
we always imported food from all around the world, Nigel. But anyway,
But it should be easier now.
No, because we've got worse terms since Brexit.
Outside the CEP,
we've got worse deals now. Now we're out of the European Union.
Which is completely insane. On net zero, you mentioned solar farms a moment ago, and the government, the big drive to net zero, the same thing happening across the whole of Europe, of course, and many regulations on nitrates, etc. Big protests in France, big protests in the Netherlands and elsewhere, protests here. Do you think there's a sort of slow reversal coming on some of that net zero stuff?
I really can't say. We need to drive the economy somehow, and the money is there in solar farms. I think, to be fair, we ought to be doing more what they are doing on the continent and putting more solar panels on structures, existing structures rather than fields. But farmers are now farmers who own their farms are absolutely going to want a solar farm because they've lost their subsidies, and it means they've got income coming in.
I certainly see them springing up all over Kent and elsewhere at the moment. And we face a Labour government. John Curtis, the doyen of political commentators, says it's 99% certain that Sir Keir Starmer will be in number 10. What are Labour saying to farming, to fishing?
Labour are listening, and they're asking us our opinion, which is really good. I think Labour understand that we need a food plan. But because so much food, British food, has been destroyed, we have to accept that we can't ramp up production. And this is the ridiculous thing about Rishi Sunak today, saying, oh, yes, we're all going to be able to produce so much food. It takes ages to ramp up production. We've lost 2 massive salad growers in this country. They've done nothing to help that. They've actually didn't help the fertiliser plants to keep open. They wanted a £10 million...
That was an odd one, wasn't it?
Yeah, a £10 million loan. So now we're reliant on imported fertiliser. There is nothing that they've done, which is good, but it means we're more reliant on food than ever. So I would say we need to reduce these dreadful trade barriers, and these new checks that have come in, are a disaster.
I honestly don't understand why we're doing that.
We need to make sure that we don't get for biosecurity. That is one of the issues.
Yes. But there is such a thing as trusted traders, and we do know there are reputable people that regularly sell stuff.
Anything that comes from anywhere in the world via Rotterdam gets shoved in.
Yeah, it's very...
And that's the problem with leaving the European Union so quickly.
Hang on a second. The biosecurity problem's there whether you're members of the European Union or not. It's a question
of because we were members of a central system, which meant it was filtered through. So we were sort of a member of like a liver almost, which filtered it through.
We've still got to think about biosecurity. But the fact we're putting checks on at this moment in time. It seems nuts to me.
The simplest thing to do,
Food production is the key to this. And you're arguing that food production has reduced since they've been in government. Do you think these words today will actually encourage more people to grow food? You don't, do you?
Well, the only way they're going to encourage farmers to grow is by putting money in their pockets and giving them a policy and a food plan.
What subsidy?
We need to, at the moment, we're being subsidised to do environmental things. We're not being encouraged, and there's so much risk involved in growing food. And we've got food on our shelves now, which is being labelled British, which isn't British, undercutting us, and it's causing massive, massive problems.
Do you know, farming, politically, always very difficult, but I do think one of the things we've got here is a government that seesawed over the course of the last 5 years and left much uncertain. We will come back to farming, fishing and many other complications in the weeks and months to come. In a moment, we have not discussed Ukraine on this programme for a very, very long time. People are getting a bit bored talking about Ukraine, but I don't know. I think we perhaps need to start talking about Ukraine and maybe about some of Russia's activity outside of Ukraine as well. All of that with Robert Fox in just a moment.
Hi there, welcome to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. Low pressure remains close to the UK for the next 24 hours and beyond. That means further showers at times, but it's not going to be a complete washout. There will be some drier and sunnier interludes. Some places will avoid the showers for long periods of time. That low pressure is sitting to the southwest. That's where we'll continue to see showers feeding into Cornwall and Devon overnight, but otherwise drying up nicely across Northern Ireland, Wales, into the Midlands, southern England, staying largely dry in the far northeast of Scotland. In between, areas of cloud, some outbreaks of rain, but some drier interludes as well. Many places under the cloud, staying at 12 to 13 Celsius, but cooler there as we begin the day for Northern Ireland, for southwest and west Scotland. Some decent sunny spells first thing. And actually, for many places, it's a bright day, but there will be this zone of cloud and outbreaks of rain from East Anglia into the East Midlands, Northern England, the far south of Scotland, keeping temperatures suppressed, and some low cloud hugging the North Sea coast of Scotland and Northern England. Elsewhere, sunny spells and a few showers, and it's a similar theme as we begin Thursday. This zone of cloud edges north into parts of northern England, southern Scotland and then eventually Northern Ireland. Either side of that, showers will develop, but the far north of Scotland, the far south of England, stays dry and sunny on Thursday. Friday, further sunny spells and showers, highs of 21 or 22.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I will remember Boris Johnson telling us, Ukraine will win the war. Ukraine will win the war. I always used to wonder what winning actually looked like. Did winning mean stopping the Russians coming in? Did winning mean getting Crimea back? I never quite knew what the aims were. But I have to say, it does seem that Russia have decided they're in this for the long haul. They've recalibrated much of their economy towards the war effort. And Ukraine, I think, is in a little bit of trouble. That added to activity from Putin that does resemble much of what went on during the Cold War. I'm joined by Robert Fox, defence editor at the Evening Standard, and a man who knows far more about this than I do. First things first, much of the Russian economy has now been turned towards military production, but also some personnel changes that you think are rather significant.
They changed the defence minister, an old buddy of Putin, Shoigu, was shuffled aside. Interestingly, he embraced him because he is still Secretary General of the Security Council, where one of his oldest buddies was the Secretary General, and he's been appointed to something else. They've put in an economist, so-called, well, Shoigu's no military man either, he was an engineer. They put this man, Belousov, in, and he's there to clean it up. He's there to make the ministry more efficient. He's, if it's possible, he's there to make it more tech, because the experience that he had before was in digital. Apparently, he knows about drones. No, it's really about cleaning it up. There is a bit of a cleaning of the stables going on at the top of the Kremlin. Why do I say that? Because 3 have been fired from the defence ministry, and 1, a lieutenant general, has been banged up on a charge for corruption. We knew it was immensely corrupt, immensely inefficient, but huge amounts of money and huge amounts of equipment going through. This is an absolutely tangible sign that we're in for a big war.
And on the battlefield, the second biggest city in Ukraine now being challenged, now being threatened, claim and counterclaim about what Russia may or may not have won over the course of time. And Ukraine clearly in trouble, because one of the arguments that is being put, and regardless of how many shells we send them, and regardless of how much American military aid gets there and when it gets there, they say they have no reserves left. And that's of men.
They've reconstituted a new brigade. That's very, very little. They need... What went wrong was last year, the, in inverted commas, summer offensive. And part of the problem, and the Brits and the Americans, the Brit sources have revealed this, they weren't really told what they were up to. That's why Zelensky, the commander, was fired in the end, because had the plan been revealed, the Americans and the Brits would have said no, because you've got no air power to cover the front line to speak of. And there are simple mistakes like that being made. There's a lot of hubris. They thought that they could do more because there had been a counterattack, curiously, in Kharkiv. But now it looks as if this is what's called a shaping operation. And the big attack may not come in Kharkiv. I've just, before coming here, I've checked. There are probes in 5 different points along the front.
You've got to guess which one's the serious one.
Yeah.
Is there a danger that Ukraine could seriously collapse militarily?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because of the thing that you pointed to, it's actually the human factor and the economy. The economy, in that kind of shape anyway, cannot sustain this for another year, the way things are going.
I've got that feeling as well. And final thought, but the big thought, you know, I've always thought Putin was rational and sensible. I see all the other things that he's doing, jamming techniques, Cold War techniques. I mean, he's not really planning to come further west, is he?
No, but he's planning to enhance something that's in his head, the imperium of Putin. And what is so interesting, if you really look at it, much of the effort is being made at sea. And Putin pride, he sees himself as Peter the Great, he really does, Catherine the Great. Don't shut me out of the Baltic. We are a great Eurasian power. That's what the headline statement is. It's making a lot of Russians miserable, because where does this end up? But, you know, tanks across the Rhine, the old Cold War myths, forget about it. But it's something we're going to have to live with a very, very long time, because he's picked some very, very odd friends, namely Iran and North Korea.
Yes. Robert Fox, as ever, great analysis. Thank you for coming on the show. Now, Danny Kruger, Member of Parliament for Wiltshire Devizes, did put up a question today about the World Health Organisation and his concerns, which are very similar to mine. Andrew Stevenson, the Minister of State for Health, replied thus.
I want to start by making 3 promises. First, the government will only accept the accord and targeted amendments to the international health regulations if they are firmly in the United Kingdom's national interest, and no text has yet been agreed. Secondly, this government will only sign up to measures that respect our national sovereignty. And third, under no circumstances will we allow the WHO to have the power to mandate lockdowns. This would be unthinkable and has never been proposed. The myth that the negotiations are being led by the WHO. They are not being led by the WHO, they are entirely led by member states. Second, the idea that we would give away a fifth of our vaccines in the next pandemic. This is simply not true.
Well, there you are. It reminds me of the old days of us signing European treaties. It's OK, guys. Don't worry your poor little heads. Everything's going to be just fine. We would never surrender our national sovereignty, and then we did exactly that. Well, I'm pleased that Danny Kruger put that forward. Other MPs, too, have asked questions today. I hope there's going to be a proper big debate on this. There'll be a petition that I'm going to launch at some point in the next few days. And just to sort of brush us off like that with a ministerial statement simply isn't good enough given what we know. Now, Jonathan Yeo, who is a portrait artist and son of a famous Conservative politician in former times, has done the first official portrait of His Majesty the King. And he's wearing the uniform of the Welsh Guards. But it is a remarkable picture because the uniform almost fades into the background, and what you see from the portrait is the face, the head of the King. It is unusual, to say the least, but I have to tell you, I really rather like it. It's different, and it does capture King Charles, I think, in a quite remarkable way. OK, that ends my career as an art critic, I'm sure, as the complaints will start to flood in with people saying they think it looks absolutely ghastly. Now, Ozempic is very much in the news, but overnight, a report suggesting that it could be a wonder drug that doesn't just help you to reduce weight, but might stop you having heart disease. All of that in just a moment.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do. His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, and unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice. Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Well, Welsh farmer Gareth Wyn-Jones is a first-language Welsh speaker and joins us now. Gareth, I mean, a lot of people will be thinking, hang on, this guy is a Welsh teacher. He speaks English. He knew what was on the parking ticket. He's just trying to make a point. He's being a prat, isn't he?
No, hey, come on, mate. I'm a first language Welsh. It's important that we watch after our language and, you know, that everything's bilingual. For us in Wales, you wouldn't go to France and expect your ticket to be in English, would you? You know, English is the most spoken language, but let's watch after these small languages. It's part of our cultural. So, you know, I take my hat off to the guy. Fair play to him for go out and to fight this. But what it's done is put it onto the mainstream media, and you're talking about it, even that you're calling them of that. You know, at least we're having a discussion about it, and it's putting the Welsh language in the forefront. And,
so,
you know,
Gareth,
speaking Welsh is important.
Yeah, so Gareth, this is a matter of principle. Is there a sense that the Welsh language is being eradicated in Wales? Is this something that the Welsh people need to rise up against?
Well, Welsh Government are trying to, you know, bring a lot more Welsh speaking into our daily life and teach people how to speak Welsh. Well, everything should be bilingual then. And I think, you know, it should start with government. So government should be putting pressure on these companies to make sure everything is bilingual. So I get behind this guy. Fair play to him. It's a good stance, and it puts it in the public eye. Let's have everything in both languages, especially Welsh, because that's my first language. And I'm
you know what? If I was Welsh, if I were Welsh, I think I would agree with you. I think I would agree with you, Gareth.
It depends if you come from Wrexham.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Now, Professor John Deanfield is my cardiologist. I go and see him once a year and he checks my blood pressure and says to me, really, given my lifestyle, I'm doing remarkably well. Well, there he was all over the front pages today saying that anti-obesity jabs, the Ozempic drug, could reduce the risk of heart attacks, strokes, heart failure in obese people, regardless of the amount of weight they lose while on the drug. And he was suggesting as much as a 20% reduction. Now, forgive me, but I am one of those big pharma sceptics. Forgive me. I'm someone that thinks perhaps it might be better just to lose weight rather than relying on Ozempic. But maybe it is a wonder drug. And joining me to discuss this, I've got Dr. Francesco Lomonaco and I've got Sally Baker, therapist and author. Now, Francesco, you're a private cardiologist.
Yes.
Deanfield, you know, who I go to every year and got a very big reputation for what he does. What do you make of this analysis that Ozempic could be potentially very helpful even if you don't lose weight on it?
Yes, basically Ozempic inhibits the sense of hunger. Semaglutide, which is the active principle, inhibits the sense of hunger, so the patient feels full sooner, so he loses weight. This study was conducted in about more than 17,000 patients, for which half were in placebo, half were taking Ozempic. Now, they showed that about 6.5% of the patients only who were on Ozempic had these cardiac arrest or cardiovascular disorders, while 8% of the patients who were on placebo all had the disease. So this means that in theory there is a protective effect of Ozempic of about 20%, which is actually quite important, and also...
Which is a big number.
Absolutely, a very big number. Just only, really only few studies have shown such an extent of study, and so it's very, very reassuring. And also depending, irrespective from the weight loss. So it doesn't, it's not that if you lose more weight, then you have more protection. So completely irrespective of that. Definitely, these are very good news for us, especially cardiologists. However, every study, of course, has to be also, there are different factors that we need to consider. First of all, we cardiologists, we're not going to prescribe immediately. We need to abide to certain guidelines that are written also by our international association, like American Heart Association, European Society of Cardiology. Actually, is upcoming now, the European Society of Cardiology meeting, in which 40,000 cardiologists are coming to London. So only after careful assessment of all the data, after many committees...
So it's early days. It's early days.
Yes, it's early days.
But isn't it true, Francesco, that basically anybody over 45 who goes to see a cardiologist, you just put them all on statins, don't you?
Well, no, that's not true, of course.
Well, it is. It is. It jolly well is.
Yeah, I believe a lot, of course, in a hybrid approach. Also in my clinic in Harley Street, where I have many patients, when there are many patients who are borderline, for example, borderline high cholesterol, borderline high blood pressure or hypertension, I don't immediately start them on a statin or antihypertensive. I always also try to find what is a sort of a synergistic approach and hybrid approach. So I have also a team of dietitians, nutritionists, and functional medicine specialists who are able also to dig deeper into the root cause of the problem, because sometimes just changing, of course, all the lifestyle, understanding the mechanism behind, we can also achieve big results. However, there are patients who have a very high blood pressure, high cholesterol.
I wish more people took that approach, because I think virtually everybody my age is on statins. I'm not. I'm not on statins.
Well, I'm sure that many people need statin. People who have
I had high blood pressure, but I did lose weight. I did start doing more exercise, and I now don't need it.
And this is my approach as well.
Things we can do. Sally, as a therapist, obesity, excess weight, massive problem in society, and growing.
Absolutely.
And growing. How useful do you think Ozempic has been?
Ozempic has been really useful to my client base. They've been buying it on private prescriptions via online pharmacies for a while now. It was very tough early days when the supply was irregular, so their body would get used to 2.5 micrograms shots once a week, and then the suppliers would say, "Oh, look, we can only supply you with 0.5%." But it's a lot of money. It's around £200 a month privately.
Is it? Is it?
Yes.
So it is a lot of money.
But my clients are coming out the other side now. What happens if people who come and see me are emotional eaters who feel that their eating is out of control, beyond their control. Ozempic and Wegovy very effectively cuts down immediately the white noise of overthinking about food. But when they're no longer overthinking about food, all the other thoughts that they've been suppressing with food, swallowing down with food, come to the fore. So they find themselves ruminating into the late at night, depressed, catastrophic thinking. It's because the root cause of their overeating, their dysfunctional eating, their...
So Ozempic doesn't cure that, does it?
No, that's why
You're dealing with the symptom, and rather like we're talking about.
Yes,
with
exactly.
The clue is in the idea that Ozempic said this is for life. You stay on it forevermore. The day you come off it, you'll start to gain weight again because the drivers that initiate your disordered eating will be there. And they're often trauma-based, childhood trauma-based. And my work is to go in and resolve and release the trauma so that people can eat for nourishment instead of self-punishment.
Because clinically obese people know that they've got a massive risk of heart attack, heart disease. They know they're reducing their life expectancy by 10, 15 years, or whatever it is. Yet they go on
It's an abstract. It's an abstract. It's a bit like smoking.
Yeah,
when we all used to smoke. When we all used to smoke.
There's still one or two of us that sin, I'm afraid, on that front, even though we know.
It's too abstract. They understand it as a logical thing, but in the moment, on the day, as a coping strategy, quite often, eating a biscuit, eating bread, it's carb-based foods that people comfort eat with. That's what gets them through. So these are old patterns of behaviour that need to be
So what do you
unpicked.
recommend? You know, you're there as a therapist, you've got somebody coming in who has been on Ozempic for some time.
Mm-hmm.
They have lost a fair bit of weight.
Sure.
They are better off as a result of it.
Yeah.
They've far less risk of having to pop to see Francesco every month.
Yes.
Do you tell them to stay on it or what? What do you do as a therapist?
A bit like a window of opportunity. While they're on the drug and it's lifted them, they've lost some weight, they feel so much better and more positive about themselves, that's the time to go in and do the therapeutic work to find out what the drivers were initially and release and resolve those so that they can go forward. But without the meds is the ideal. Yeah.
In terms of cardiology, Francesco, you know, we keep being told that, and I know you're in the private sector, and it's a very important sector, but of course the public sector is vast. And we're told that in terms of cardiology, we're told that in terms of dealing with strokes, we're told outside your field, perhaps in terms of dealing with cancer, that the French spend about the same amount of their gross domestic product on health and yet get consistently better returns. What are we doing wrong?
Well, definitely what we need to do is to insist since a young age to try to educate, of course, more the population. This is what is missing. Because nowadays, many people want the easy fix. There is a problem, you just go there and fix it. But actually, we need to try to establish a sort of...
being part of that fix, in a sense.
Yes, but of course, Ozempic now we will have to see. We'll have to wait for the recommendations of our associations regarding the using it or not, because the data seem reassuring, but we need to dig deeper and understand. But definitely, we need to try to have a more holistic view. Because, of course, medications is not always the fix to any problems. Because also, like in the United States, they create almost the disease with all, and then they can sell their medication. Medications are very, very important, of course, when there are diseases that otherwise, without any other option, they couldn't be treated. So, of course, they are extremely important. I am a doctor, I prescribe them. But only as a last option. I try other things first.
Well, I'm pleased to hear that, because I think so many, particularly GPs, just want to get rid of the patient and they're just put on something and off they go. Lee Anderson, quite a controversial member of Parliament, and there was a health debate going on about obesity. And he got up and said, well, the problem is that people don't know how to cook anymore.
Well, it was stopped in schools.
But he's right, isn't he? I mean, when you see young people, young obese people, you know, have they been taught anything at school about nutrition?
No.
Have they been taught anything about how to cook?
And we live in obesogenic areas, environments where you can't buy fresh fruit and vegetables. They're all at a premium price, whereas chicken in a box is really cheap. So, you know, everything works against people living a healthy, holistic lifestyle.
But cooking at home can be cheap.
Cooking
if
at
you
home
buy
can be
selectively,
cheap.
if you know what you're doing, you can make it cheap.
But no one is taught anymore. No one's taught.
Yes.
And if you're not lucky in how you were raised and taught by your mum and your dad, then you don't learn.
So is home economics thought to be a sort of terribly 1960s thing? And oh dear, we can't do that anymore. And We just don't do it, do we?
We don't do it. They design pizza boxes now, and they should bring it back. We need kitchens back in schools, and we need to teach kids how to cook. Yeah.
Isn't it interesting that in America, the richest country in the world, and comparatively getting richer than all of us with every year that goes by, that for the first time, life expectancy is now going down.
I think it's the same in the UK.
Yes, and I think we've certainly topped
we have
in the UK, and obesity is the modern disaster. And education absolutely at the root of it. Thank you both for coming in. It's a fascinating conversation. And one person that doesn't need Ozempic because he's never got an ounce of fat on him, of course, is the Rees-Mogg. There's everybody down.
I've never been fat, but I do take statins.
You take statins?
Yeah.
Do you?
I have high cholesterol, but with statins I have absolutely perfect cholesterol. It means I can carry on supporting the Somerset dairy industry. Having lots of cream and cheese and
to you.
There's a good constituency of people.
Well, I thought
statins are amazing.
I thought the red wine would sort out the cholesterol, no?
I mainly drink as much as you do to compete, and I'm not quite there yet.
Now, Jacob, you have a slightly eccentric flavour to your show.
I'm going to be talking about you this evening.
I know.
I'm going to be debating a great segment about... We need to get serious in the Conservative Party. We need to reunite the Conservative family. And that means bringing back people in your position who hold Conservative views. And I think you should hold high office.
Well, I don't know whether you... I mean, you can put this to your panel.
Oh, yeah.
And it'd be very interesting to get their reaction. I'm not sure Mr Sunak would be terribly keen.
I would rather make a big, open and comprehensive offer to you and your friends in Reform than to the Lib Dems, as a general rule.
Well, Jacob there. Well, Jacob, not mincing his words. I have a feeling the next hour is going to be really very interesting, if perhaps unrealistic. But who knows? Let's have a look. What's the weather going to do? Over to Aidan McGibbon.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. Low pressure remains close to the UK for the next 24 hours and beyond. That means further showers at times, but it's not going to be a complete washout. There will be some drier and sunnier interludes. Some places will avoid the showers for long periods of time. That low pressure is sitting to the southwest. That's where we'll continue to see showers feeding into Cornwall and Devon overnight, but otherwise drying up nicely across Northern Ireland, Wales, into the Midlands, southern England, staying largely dry in the far northeast of Scotland. In between, areas of cloud, some outbreaks of rain, but some drier interludes as well. Many places under the cloud, staying at 12 to 13 Celsius, but cooler there as we begin the day for Northern Ireland, for southwest and west Scotland. Some decent sunny spells first thing. And actually, for many places, it's a bright day, but there will be this zone of cloud and outbreaks of rain from East Anglia into the East Midlands, Northern England, the far south of Scotland, keeping temperatures suppressed, and some low cloud hugging the North Sea coast of Scotland and Northern England. Elsewhere, sunny spells and a few showers, and it's a similar theme as we begin Thursday. This zone of cloud edges north into parts of northern England, southern Scotland, and then eventually Northern Ireland. Either side of that, showers will develop, but the far north of Scotland, the far south of England, stays dry and sunny on Thursday. Friday, further sunny spells and showers, highs of 21 or 22.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far. A totally terrific £20,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer spectacular. You could use that cash to splash out on a holiday, make the garden glam, buy a new car, or just save it for a rainy day. Whatever you'd spend